In recent years, the world has witnessed a surge in geopolitical tensions that could fundamentally reshape the global order. Many are asking, could we be on the verge of World War III? With the United States and China competing for global supremacy, Russia's involvement in Ukraine, and rising instability in various regions, the international landscape has become more unpredictable than ever before. This growing unrest raises a fundamental question. Is the world edging closer to another global conflict, or are we simply witnessing the cyclical nature of political rivalries and territorial disputes? Let's explore the key factors contributing to this heated atmosphere and examine whether we're on the brink of a war that could change the course of history. At the heart of these rising tensions are the geopolitical struggles between major world powers. The US and China, two of the world's most influential nations, are locked in a multifaceted rivalry. What began as a trade dispute has evolved into a larger contest for global dominance, encompassing military might, technological advancements, and economic influence. Both nations have increasingly turned to aggressive tactics, with China asserting territorial claims in the South China Sea and the US reinforcing its military presence in the Pacific. Meanwhile, issues related to Taiwan and Hong Kong continue to add fuel to the fire, further complicating the relationship between these two superpowers. With both sides boasting nuclear arsenals, this rivalry is one of the most dangerous flashpoints in modern geopolitics. Then there's Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a conflict that has rocked Europe and redefined international relations. While Ukraine fights for its sovereignty, the broader conflict between NATO and Russia raises serious concerns about the future of global security. The US and European allies have extended significant military and financial support to Ukraine, in direct opposition to Russia's aggressive actions. The war has sparked a new Cold War-like dynamic, where alliances are drawn and military posturing becomes more pronounced. With Russia's nuclear capabilities and a deeply entrenched ideological divide, this conflict serves as a reminder of how quickly regional disputes can spiral into global confrontations. The role of NATO and its ongoing expansion is a critical factor that continues to escalate these tensions. But it's not just the traditional powerhouses that are shaping the global stage. Emerging nations are also playing an increasingly influential role. Countries like India, Brazil, and Turkey are no longer content with merely aligning with established global powers. Instead, they are carving out their own spheres of influence, pursuing policies that often clash with those of the US and other Western nations. These new power players have the ability to tilt the global balance, especially as they form strategic alliances and increase their military capacities. Their growing influence underscores a shift away from the unipolar world order led by the US, and this change is contributing to the instability we are witnessing today. Finally, the ongoing global issues of climate change, resource scarcity, and economic inequality add yet another layer to the brewing storm. As natural resources become increasingly scarce, competition over access to water, energy, and arable land has the potential to spark conflicts. Meanwhile, economic disparities continue to grow, fueling resentment and creating a fertile ground for radicalization and political instability. These environmental and economic challenges, which disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, are not just peripheral issues, they are central drivers of the geopolitical conflicts of tomorrow. The future of warfare may not only be fought on battlefields but in cyberspaces and over dwindling resources, and these new domains of conflict are unpredictable and increasingly dangerous. One of the most critical aspects contributing to the rising risk of global conflict is the growing military involvement of powerful nations in ongoing regional crises. The situation in Ukraine is a prime example of how local conflicts can quickly escalate into global issues. NATO's involvement, particularly the West's military and financial support for Ukraine, has deepened the divide between NATO and Russia. The military support, including advanced weapons systems, has turned Ukraine into a proxy battleground. While NATO insists it is acting to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and defend international law, Russia views this as an existential threat to its own security and sphere of influence. As the West continues to ramp up support for Ukraine, there is a real danger that this conflict could spill over into other regions, drawing in more nations and pushing the world closer to full-scale war. Meanwhile, tensions in the South China Sea continue to intensify, presenting another potential flashpoint for conflict. China's assertive territorial claims in the region have been met with resistance from neighboring countries, including the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia. These disputes are not just about control over small islands but are strategically significant due to the rich natural resources, including oil and gas, that lie beneath the sea. For China, dominance over the South China Sea is key to securing its maritime trade routes and asserting its power in the Asia-Pacific region. On the other hand, the U.S. has repeatedly challenged China's territorial claims by conducting freedom of navigation operations. With both China and the U.S. having military assets in the region, the possibility of a direct military confrontation remains a very real threat. Beyond military tensions, cyber warfare has emerged as a new and increasingly potent form of geopolitical conflict. As technology continues to evolve, cyber attacks have become an essential tool for nations to wield influence and disrupt rival governments and economies. Countries like Russia, China, and the U.S. have all been accused of engaging in cyber warfare against one another. These cyber attacks target everything from critical infrastructure to political institutions, and their impact can be devastating. In 2020, the SolarWinds cyber attack demonstrated just how vulnerable major governments and corporations are to this new form of warfare. The increasing frequency and sophistication of cyber attacks suggest that nations are not only preparing for conventional military conflict but are also investing heavily in digital warfare, which could make traditional military strategies obsolete in future conflicts. One of the underlying causes of the increasing global tensions is the shifting balance of power in international politics. The U.S., once the dominant superpower, is no longer the uncontested global leader. The rise of China as an economic and military powerhouse has led to the emergence of a more multipolar world, where regional powers like India, Russia, and even smaller nations are asserting themselves on the global stage. This has led to competition for influence and resources, particularly in strategic regions such as the Middle East, Africa, and the Asia-Pacific. The influence of emerging powers is causing a reordering of traditional alliances and forcing global institutions, such as the United Nations and the World Trade Organization, to reconsider their roles. The increasing fragmentation of the global order is creating an environment ripe for conflict, as these powers vie for control over the future direction of the world. Moreover, the global economy is increasingly intertwined with political power, and this connection can serve as both a stabilizer and a source of conflict. Economic sanctions, trade wars, and financial pressures are increasingly being used as tools of geopolitical strategy. The U.S., in particular, has used sanctions to isolate countries like Iran and Russia, aiming to punish them for their actions on the world stage. However, these sanctions can have unintended consequences, not only impacting the targeted nations but also causing economic instability that ripples across the globe. Trade wars, like the one between the U.S. and China, also have far-reaching effects on global markets, disrupting supply chains and creating economic uncertainty. As countries increasingly use economic leverage to advance their political goals, the global economy becomes a battleground in its own right, where economic conflicts could quickly evolve into military ones. The ongoing economic challenges play a significant role in the current state of global tensions. The pandemic has exacerbated economic inequalities and highlighted the fragile nature of global trade systems. Nations are struggling with inflation, unemployment, and skyrocketing debt levels, which has fueled nationalist sentiments and protectionist policies. As the economic landscape becomes more unstable, countries are increasingly looking inward, prioritizing their own interests over global cooperation. The competition for limited resources, such as energy and raw materials, is intensifying, and this is making diplomatic negotiations more difficult. In this environment, it's easy to see how economic struggles could spill over into political conflicts, further increasing the risk of war. With countries desperate to secure their own interests, the likelihood of a larger, more destructive conflict is on the rise. Another major driver of geopolitical tensions is the ongoing struggle for control over vital natural resources. As the global population grows and climate change accelerates, access to water, energy, and agricultural land has become more crucial than ever before. In many parts of the world, nations are already facing water shortages, and disputes over the management of shared resources are becoming more frequent. In the Middle East, for example, access to water has long been a source of tension, with countries like Turkey, Syria, and Iraq engaged in disputes over river systems. As climate change worsens, resource scarcity will only intensify, making cooperation between nations even more difficult. These resource-based conflicts are not only limited to developing countries. Even the most advanced economies are grappling with their own resource challenges, further complicating international relations. The environmental crisis, particularly climate change, has emerged as a major factor influencing geopolitics. Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and droughts are already causing displacement on a massive scale, with millions of people forced to leave their homes. Climate refugees are becoming a significant issue for many nations, leading to tensions over immigration and border control policies. As countries face the environmental fallout of their own actions and those of others, the geopolitical landscape is becoming more volatile. In fact, many analysts believe that climate change will be one of the primary drivers of future conflicts. As resources become scarcer, competition over the remaining fertile land and fresh water will likely become a major flashpoint in the coming decades. The question is not if these tensions will escalate, but when and how they will manifest. Despite the rising tensions and the growing threat of war, there is still room for hope in the pursuit of peace. Diplomacy remains a powerful tool for conflict resolution, and many nations continue to engage in dialogue through international organizations like the United Nations. While the geopolitical climate may seem dire, there are numerous examples throughout history where international cooperation has helped avert catastrophic wars. The ongoing negotiations over nuclear disarmament, for instance, show that countries can come together to address shared threats. Similarly, efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, though far from perfect, offer a glimpse of the possibility for peaceful solutions. The key will be whether nations can overcome their differences and find common ground before the situation escalates beyond control. In the end, the risk of global conflict is influenced by a complex web of political, economic, and environmental factors. While some argue that we are witnessing the early stages of World War III, others believe that the current tensions are merely a reflection of long-standing rivalries and struggles for power. Regardless of which perspective is correct, one thing is clear: the world is at a critical juncture. As global powers jostle for influence, and as economic and environmental pressures continue to rise, the potential for conflict remains ever present. The future is uncertain, but it is up to the international community to come together, build bridges, and work towards a more stable and peaceful world. Only through cooperation and diplomacy can we hope to avoid the devastating consequences of another world war. While the potential for conflict remains a significant concern, it is important to recognize the broader context that shapes these tensions. History has shown that the geopolitical landscape is never static. Wars, while devastating, often result in the restructuring of political systems, the emergence of new powers, and the reshaping of global alliances. The aftermath of past wars, such as World War I and World War II, highlighted how global cooperation and the establishment of institutions like the United Nations were pivotal in maintaining peace in the post-war era. While the risk of war today is undeniable, history suggests that global conflicts often lead to a redefined world order. The real question is how the international community will respond in a world that is more interconnected than ever. One of the most concerning elements of the current geopolitical situation is the rise of nationalism and populism. In many countries, political leaders are using rhetoric that emphasizes national sovereignty and isolationism, often at the expense of global cooperation. This has led to a breakdown in multilateral diplomacy, with nations focusing on their own interests rather than working together for the greater good. The surge in nationalism is not only causing division within countries but is also exacerbating international tensions. When countries prioritize their own agendas over global stability, the risk of conflict increases as alliances weaken and diplomatic channels close. These populist movements are gaining traction across the world, making it even harder to avoid a potential global confrontation. Despite the bleak outlook, there are efforts to address the challenges posed by these tensions. International organizations, although often criticized for inefficiency, still play a crucial role in conflict prevention. The United Nations, despite its flaws, continues to serve as a forum for dialogue and peacebuilding. Similarly, organizations like the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund work to mediate economic disputes and promote global cooperation. While these institutions may not be perfect, they offer a platform for nations to come together, share concerns, and engage in discussions that can prevent full-scale war. However, the willingness of global leaders to compromise and prioritize diplomacy over military escalation will be key in determining whether these efforts are successful. The growing influence of public opinion cannot be underestimated. In today's digital age, information spreads rapidly, and citizens are more informed than ever before. Social media platforms allow individuals to voice their concerns and push for accountability from their leaders. This has resulted in a more engaged global citizenry, with millions of people advocating for peace and diplomatic solutions. The power of public pressure has already played a role in shifting policy decisions in various countries, particularly in issues related to climate change, human rights, and economic inequality. As the global community becomes more interconnected, citizens have a greater ability to demand that their governments prioritize peace and stability over military action. Public opinion is a force that could steer the course of history toward diplomacy rather than war. As we look to the future, it is clear that the path forward will not be easy. The geopolitical tensions we face today are not simple or easily resolved, and the possibility of war remains an ever-present threat. However, there are reasons to remain hopeful. The international community has faced similar challenges in the past and has found ways to navigate through them. The key will be cooperation, diplomacy, and the collective will to avoid conflict at all costs. It is up to all of us as global citizens to advocate for peace, to push for dialogue, and to hold our leaders accountable. The future of global stability depends on our ability to work together, to put aside differences, and to find common ground in an increasingly complex world. Only by doing so can we prevent another devastating world war.